It's as much as we, talk about them, we really don't get to hear from them on their issues. And Caleb has been just amazing. He's a stellar guy. You heard his unfortunate situation during last summit when we were there. He came up, spoke with us, and then we're really excited to help him. And then he met with a car accident, right at Georgia summit, like Cyber Future Summit last year. And then the kid just recovered, bounced back, and you see he shared his how he stayed distraction free. He's very faith based. He was not really practicing faith, but you have to have an anchor. You have to be rooted with something, and it has to be something that's significant. And that changed his way and orientation. Like, I think we all are looking for that anchor. We are all looking for something to hold on to. As much as we want to protect the cybersecurity infrastructure and everything, but to first protect our own, well-being, mental well-being, and health and everything. And Caleb, at such a young age, he has figured that out. And this kid, all of a sudden reached out that, I'm now, he was late into the game of getting an internship. And within 60 days, we ferried his resume everywhere. Within, I think, 60 days of everything, he got an internship at Sandia National Labs. So he did last year, he did this summer, he did a really good internship, really enjoyed. And then he has been relentless in pursuing, like telling us, well, I want to, is my story getting shared? And I was like, okay, we'll share this, of course, on the stage, but I think, it should be streamed out because everybody needs to know this. Many of you actually are embedded in the cybersecurity infrastructure, so you know what we deal with. But I think many, as probably Bianca told this morning, right? It is just, they're dealing with a lot as business, and on top of it, they deal with cyber. It's just an unfair ask. So anyway, I think one of the things that we want to close out from a panel standpoint is having these two fine gentlemen come up there and talk about one critical issue, which is cyber insurance. We have a pre-recorded webinar. Unfortunately, with all this, weather issues, John and Ken were not able to come in, and those who were here were stuck with us in San Antonio. Hopefully, they'll have a good time this evening. But we wanted to make sure John Averill, not John Averill, John Lundgren, and Bob are able to join us to continue that conversation. Okay, so welcome, gentlemen. And let you reintroduce yourself for a little bit. I think, John, you're up here for the first time, so.
Sure. Intro. Perfect. Thanks, Val. Thanks, everyone. I'm John Lundgren. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BreachBits. We provide automated penetration testing as a service and cyber risk measurement for businesses. Prior to this, I spent a career in the Navy as a cyber warfare officer, and also spent some time in the tech industry at Microsoft doing investigations of the world's largest botnets and malware organizations. So I've really seen this ecosystem from many different angles.
Thanks, Val. Bob Seaman, Managing Director of CyberCurb. I'm an attorney, electrical engineer, and entrepreneur. I advise at the intersection of those three areas.
And I'd be surprised if everyone in the summit who has attended here has not known Bob. That's the first question going to be on the survey coming back to you, is have you spoken with Bob or know Bob, right? It's unmistakable. You cannot leave without knowing Bob well. So thank you, Bob, for being here for the cause as well as for being our support. So I would put a couple of questions that probably are leading into this discussion and start with John here. In terms of the trends you have observed in threat environment in the recent months, and I think we have to be, the general insurance industry is very well known stat in terms of the metrics and the measurement and everything is there. You can predict what will happen from an insurance side after you have an event, and that's how the underwriters write it. But talk to us a little bit about the threat environment that you're seeing, and how can the cyber insurers make an informed product, which is at stake right now.
Yeah, easier said than done, Val. So when you think of the threat landscape, you can break it into the objectives of what attackers are focusing on today, as well as the tactics and techniques that they're using. So for objectives, we're still seeing ransomware being the primary objective, especially for obviously financially motivated attackers. Right behind that is business email compromise. So organizations with either weak or exposed passwords allow an attacker to gain access to their email and then use that as kind of a launch pad for further attacks. When you look at tactics, there's not much of a change here. There are vulnerabilities that are in the public-facing infrastructure that are exploited, and really there are probably 3 to 4 vulnerabilities that make up over 90% of these cases, especially that lead to claims for data breaches. Behind that, social engineering, which has been around for forever. And then one that's rising is just the use of compromised or weak passwords and credentials. So, as businesses get better and faster at patching their vulnerable systems that are exposed to the internet, attackers are forced to really focus on getting their hands on credentials to be able to really log in instead of break in. And that is rising in terms of the percentage of causes of data breaches.
Well, Bob, your take on that dynamic threat environment?
Talk about what insurance companies themselves are doing and can do to improve the cybersecurity situation. They are imposing new underwriting requirements that you have a particular cybersecurity posture. Connecting to what I was talking earlier about Bitcoin, my current obsession is that I think cyber insurance companies can take a public position on Bitcoin, because if you take a look at the data, there is a high correlation from 2016 with the rise of cryptocurrencies and ransomware attacks. Get rid of Bitcoin, you get rid of the vast majority of financially incentivized attacks.
Well, I think Bitcoin is definitely one aspect of this where you have an incentive to accumulate something that initially people thought cannot be tracked and traced, but that's changing fairly soon or already. When you tie this back to the product itself, the cyber insurance product, that is going through a huge turmoil right now, what do you think will help the industry, especially the underwriters, create a baseline, right? Maybe Bob, you start, and then John, you can add into it.
John, I'll give you that first.
Yeah, so I think for the cyber insurance industry, there are really 2 main challenges that they face that have made writing policies for businesses in cyber so challenging. The first is just a lack of visibility into the risk that they're underwriting and that they're writing policies for. So, there was a time when, really all you needed was a short questionnaire that said, do you have any computers and how much revenue does your business generate? And that was pretty much all you needed. As ransomware rose, that clearly wasn't enough. So the next generation was, that combined with some basic hygiene checks. But as we've seen, last year as ransomware grew, even that wasn't enough. So I think really what we need is kind of a next generation of cyber risk measurement for this industry that, looks at these potential policyholders through an attacker's lens to be able to test them and really find out where that risk is.
Absent that, what they're resorting to is simply lowering the limits, raising the premiums, and adding more underwriting requirements. And then when there's a claim, of course, like all insurance companies, they're looking for ways not to pay. The latest one being the war exemption. They're claiming in many cases that this is an act of war. And if you look in the fine print of all insurance contracts, acts of war are exempted. Ransomware attacks, you saw it with NotPetya, and more insurance companies are not paying on that basis.
Yeah, and I think, this again started with the judicial precedents, right? With Mondelez versus Zurich, and that became the precedent. And now Lloyd said, okay, we're not going to underwrite anything that has a connotation of war. And why did you define war? And that's why we had this topic earlier about cyber peace and the policy and the geopolitical aspect. Because without understanding that, you cannot really design a product. It's a two-way street, right? We always talk about product market fit as entrepreneurs, and the insurers thought that they can create a product, test it, and it will work. But it's a shifting monster now. Cyber is. So, what do we think would become the baseline? I think there is something that has to be a constant enough risk that can be underwritten to. And what's your thought?
Yeah, so I would say, in addition to kind of more rigorous ways of testing and measuring the risk of these organizations, I think there are two phenomena that are unique to cyber that really other lines of insurance don't have to worry about. So one is kind of the dynamism of the infrastructure of each organization that's constantly changing. It's hard to write a policy for risk on an organization on day one when day 10 their infrastructure could look very different. So that's one level of dynamism. And the second is just the constant changing of the cyber ecosystem. So new vulnerabilities that are released, new tactics that are released. So I think because of those two phenomena for cyber insurance, it really has to move away from a point in time, here's your policy, we'll see you next year. The cyber insurers that are going to succeed are the ones that will continuously monitor their customers, their policyholders, to keep them ahead of attackers.
While we understand that cyber risk is qualitative, there are more and more quantitative measurements, such as your technology. Do you see cyber insurers using the data that you produce as a metric?
I think the cyber insurers, that we talk to, are looking for exactly that. So they've done the questionnaires, they've done the kind of light hygiene checking, but they're realizing that they need to go a step beyond that. They need to make it faster and really more convenient for those underwriters who they don't have time to dig through a whole bunch of false positives. They need to get to the heart of the matter and figure out where are the biggest risks for this organization so they can write the right policy that fits for that organization.
Right. And I think, we had this automation versus experts debate, which is, I think, ongoing, and we always need some of the repetitive tasks have to be automated. Without that, we'd never get efficiency, right? And there's always this anticipation and anxiety of automation replacing talent. I think that will never happen. But I think a lot of this automation would also bring consistent processes, which I believe can be the underpinning of the underwriters underwriting this. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the automation really helps, both at the beginning and throughout the policy in just the illumination aspect that we talked about in earlier talks. So, probably the most common thing I hear from new customers that use our product is they see what's in their attack surface and they say, I didn't really tell my cyber insurance provider this because I had no idea it was there. So, that automation really helps shine a light on that infrastructure so they can make better decisions and at the end of the day, be less of a risk on the cyber insurance carrier that is writing their policy.
One of the great things about this conference is that there's such a diversity of topics and speakers. So we heard from the CEO of DeLorean about how the car companies, the insurers, are getting access in real time to all the information of the driver. Are you driving with both feet? How are you braking too fast? So they're getting that data in real time, and maybe they might be canceling your insurance in real time too.
Yeah. No, that's true, and in fact, now there is a little bit of if you compare the insurance that we are used to, like you have property insurance, you have casualty insurance, you have automotive insurance, of course, on the consumer side. Then there is D&O insurance, and there is corporate liability, general liability insurance, right? There's a broad set of products that are standardized, and each of these products have actuarial tables of years of usage. And I think the industry by itself is going through a whole shift because the amount of data that's coming in, they don't know how to use it, right? And how to productize the data. I think it's probably the own resources becoming their own peril, and that's impacting the consumer. So let me ask you another, kind of your opinion or point of view on this is, we have actually in a real time, there is a partner we're working with, and they are part of a private equity firm, and they are mandated to have a certain set of items implemented by end of year, right? And there is scrambling to do that. Do you see hard requirements shifting by shifting landscape, like, rather than following a checklist, something that's continuous, automated, and could be a little bit more predictive in terms of what you can achieve in a year or versus 2 years?
I think so. I think there's going to have to be more and more focus on those continuous type of monitoring and testing for cyber insurance, because at the current rate that policies and premiums are increasing, most companies are going to get priced out here before too long. So that industry is really trying to correct itself, and I think that's the natural way that correction is going to have to happen. Continuous monitoring, testing, because the companies that are doing it right, they need to be able to get the credit for that as well. So that's where the testing can come into play to say, listen, from the outside, it looks like maybe I have some challenges, but you can't see the 3 or 4 things we're doing on the inside to compensate for that. So you need that testing and that proactive
the driver's
approach.
discount that, I think Geico
Exactly.
and Liberty Mutual, everybody said that, you put a tracking device in your car and we'll give you $50 if you do well every quarter or something.
Right.
Everybody has a part of the discount program.
Right. Yeah, and those companies should get that benefit of that can be the carrot for taking cybersecurity seriously. So we don't always have to have a stick in the form of regulation or fines or things like that to propel businesses to take it seriously.
And businesses are taking it seriously at the board level. You mentioned D&O Insurance. Board members, board of directors of corporations, they're rightly very concerned about their own personal liability. They have directors' liability insurance, but does that director's liability insurance cover them if they don't properly supervise the security activities at the corporations? So it's not necessarily listening to a report once a quarter by the CISO and not knowing what questions to ask. These cyber insurers and the judges at the end of the day, when there's a lawsuit, they may be demanding more continuous weekly, monthly supervision by experts on the board. There's now, it's going to be a requirement, but it's effectively becoming a requirement by the Securities and Exchange Commission that corporations in the United States have a member of the board of directors that really knows about cybersecurity. That's the right thing. They know what questions to ask.
Yeah, and I think the D&O writers that we are seeing right now, I've skimmed through, as probably Bob, we have talked about the privacy terms and agreements that we have skimmed through many times, so that we know what typically are the exceptions. I think D&O insurance, we have to see where the language is appropriate and what can be added or subtracted. Because right now we have the general liability and the D&O riders, but you think about the personal liability that the not Section 16 officers, right? You know what I'm talking about. You're talking about Joe Sullivan's case. I mean, yes, he's going through something that he's being hammered on both sides because of a situation, right? That of course we don't know all the details, but at least we know that things are progressing, and regardless of that, if there is certain information that doesn't go out, puts the personal liability on the CISOs, right?
Right.
So your thoughts on the continuum of this insurance industry? One, as a extension of the D&O product that's already there, then cyber insurance product, and then personal liability product. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, just on the personal liability, and you mentioned Joe Sullivan's unfortunate case. I think as a negotiating position, every CISO in this room, when they're next renewing their contract, should require personal liability for their activities. They should be covered under the corporation's D&O insurance.
And I think the bar is going to continue to get raised for, what should be reasonably expected of executives when it comes to cyber insecurity. I think there was, we went through a phase where they weren't really expected to know, a whole lot about that level of the business. We're in an education phase, but I think we're getting to the point where there's going to be fewer and fewer excuses acceptable for those executives, and we're going to see more and more be held accountable for some of these breaches and large large cases.
And it's getting held accountable for you don't know how many jobs back, right? I mean, not that you moved on to a new job, and that doesn't mean that you are relinquishing all your responsibility, accountability. You still can learn that. I think that the boards are typically used to, but now the cyber leaders have to get ready for that responsibility as well. Well, the other thing that I wanted to dig into a little bit is, how can we contribute to that data? One thing is continuous assessment, not just continuous compliance, but continuous assessment and visibility into the data, and then application of the data to securing or maturing the insurance product. How do you think your data can do that for us, the industry?
Yeah, so at BreachBits, we do continuous and automated red teaming pen testing to really find in any business where an attacker can break in, what are the options that an attacker could have, and then we test them. So, that type of fidelity for an insurance company, right now they're looking at a lot of theoretical risks for companies. So, the age of an SSL certificate or things like that aren't really used in a breach. It could be an indicator of another portion of cyber risk, but we want to focus on, no kidding, what are the things that are going to cause a claim and cause a breach, and so that's where we're trying to add that additional level of fidelity to give them that insight and be able to test it to give the customers that are taking it seriously, let them get the credits and the benefit of lower premiums.
John, in addition to the data you provide the insurance companies, what would you say would be other data that would complement and be valuable to the insurers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think getting rid of the questionnaires is, that's not really, I think there's still a lot of value that can be had from, especially larger organizations, getting some insight into what their internal processes are. Because, as we've talked about throughout the event, given enough time and effort, attackers are likely going to get in. We're kind of past the time where there was a stigma of when your organization was breached, it was because you were unique or you did something awful. It's become so widespread that everyone can expect it. So you still need some level of insight into that organization's ability to exercise their processes. What are their internal, response capabilities? That's still something that is needed. And, just like, credit scoring or things like that, there's not going to be one end-all be-all source of data. The insurance carriers that are going to get ahead are going to take the right sources of data from several different viewpoints for that organization to measure their overall risk.
So I think we need a framework that connects all of this together, because the internal, there is an outside invisibility, which needs to be, because there's the attacker's prerogative to have that. And then inside out visibility, like, what's going out from your, from a business standpoint that's authorized or desired, and then connecting those two so that, there is a balance between where to plug the holes, because you can't plug all the holes. Right. There'll be new holes open up every time, right? As it's a Swiss cheese equation. So I think I'd like to close this panel by asking you one question about what would be one thing that you would like to see in the insurance industry done, that will advance this rather than completely take away a tool that we already have?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest impact, aside from kind of raising the bar for evaluating risk for organizations at the beginning of a policy, is just getting rid of the annual kind of mindset when it comes to insurance and looking at it as a continuous product that's being provided on a regular basis, because insurance providers, they have a role to play in helping their customers stay ahead of breaches, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the right business case for them to reduce the likelihood of claims.
Solid point.
The insurance companies need to play a bigger public policy role in educating not just the lawmakers and the policymakers and the regulators, but also the public, small businesses. Large businesses understand it. Insurance companies, at the end of the road, they're the payers, and I think they can do a lot more in that field.
Well, that's great. I think that's much positive than where we started this discussion from. And I'm sure there is this will just be an evolution in the journey. And milestone is that learning mechanism that you put back in place, so that the ones that people are doing, the carrot is there along with the stick that goes with it for the insurance side, and the claims are not denied. Now, we went from 100% claim reimbursement to almost a denial at this point, which is a flip-flop. But hopefully, with the ideas we discussed here and the resources that this team brings along, we can have a pretty robust, risk management product, which insurance is. So, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for being with us to close out this.
Thanks, Val. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for being with us for for closing this out. I'm really delighted that we could do this. In fact, for those that are here, if you want to come up stage, we can probably take a picture. This has become a tradition that we always remember those that stuck with us towards the end, and probably our friends up there, Meena and Catherine and Jen and Leah. All of you can probably come up here and we can take a group picture. But let me thank not only those that are online joined us, and I think we are getting to the 5 o'clock or the next hour of the weekend hour already on a Friday. So thank you for those joining in. All this streaming will be available to the members online. If you didn't notice when you signed up, if you paid a full ticket to come in, and if you coming through one of our partners, all of you get a free annual membership for CFF for entire year. And we want to make sure that you take that year to learn and know more about us and the work we do, and the different initiatives that we have. And I'm sure you'll find a place in one of those, be it a social impact program, or is it a workforce development program, or a leadership development program. One or the other, I think, it fits into this journey. So, we really want to thank the Port San Antonio. We want to thank those from the Chamber of Commerce of San Antonio, the Economic Development Department. We want to thank Cyber Texas Foundation. We want to thank the Greater SATX and everyone who's been involved. I may have been forgetting the names, but I'll tell you, we'll never forget what you did for us. To bring us here in San Antonio, bring the community together, give us a home to, get our members together and our partners to have this discussion. I hope you feel, and I think I'm getting more and more vindicated about that this is definitely a unique forum. This is a forum where you can bring a lot of different diverse topics that go into making the cybersecurity industry robust and better than what it is today. I definitely appreciate all the support that we got from the city in doing this. Jim Poshbach, Marcel, Paco, Jeff Fair, and Joe Sanchez. I can just go on naming people. Richard Rodriguez, General Walsh. Everybody has been part of making this happen. And definitely thanks to our board and advisors who have been, who have been working with us to make this happen every day. But specifically, this summit was a lot of effort for us. For the first year, we went from a member-only, invitation-only event to a more public event where we can have a little bit more engagement with our partners, and not only bring those partners into the discussion, but also share that through this event to outside world. And now this content is going to be available to those that are that are going to be using it as a resource to make some decisions. Cyber Future Foundation is a leadership organization. We hope to extend that leadership's platform to make this an organization where the most well-rounded cyber leaders are built. And as much as you can, appreciate all the discussions that we have had here have been as well-rounded as probably needed to address our industry's challenges and as well as the social economic impact that needs to happen. So I thank you one and all, everyone, for being there and sticking around for the Friday evening with us. And I hope that everybody who's going back home has a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you have a safe trip back. If you're flying, watch out for the weather in and around Dallas. There's, I think, a lot of our flights are disrupted. So watch for that, and be safe, be well. We will announce very soon our host city for next year's event. We have been asked to come back here. We'll definitely consider that. But we definitely want to make sure that the other partners in other cities and states get the opportunity. Hopefully, we'll have another in San Antonio soon. But we are going to be back in San Antonio for many more things than just the summit. So that's the assurance that we want to provide to the city leadership. I spoke with the mayor about that, and the other leaders that have been involved. The other two candidates for next year is Denver and Colorado Springs I-25 corridor, and Phoenix, Scottsdale. There are two. We have been speaking with them for quite some time. So hopefully you get to visit another city just by the pretext of visiting Cyber Future Summit. Our next event that's already confirmed on the books is the Cyber Future Dialogue, which is our annual program in Davos. We'll be up in the Zalp, our exclusive home of Cyber Future Foundation during the Davos week. I know many of who are here, our partners and members visited us, will visit us there. So looking forward to seeing you in the subsequent programs. Please stay engaged and collaborate as deeply as you can to advance not only the industry, but your own professional careers in the industry. Wish you good luck, and thank you for being with us. Thank you one and all. Goodbye and have a great weekend.